and welcome to the Left Wing Live. Well, Ireland are up and running in the 2022 Six Nations. They beat Wales 29 points to 7 at the Aviva Stadium, and what a performance it was. Well, we'll analyse this game in the company of Irish Independent Chief Rugby correspondent Rory O'Connor and Cian Tracy, who are at the Aviva Stadium. Well, Rory, not a bad start for Ireland's Six Nations.
Absolutely, Sinead. I just watched Mack Hansen leave the field after what was a real dream debut for a man who probably coming into the Six Nations window didn't think he was going to play for Ireland. From the moment a deflected Johnny Sexton kick fell into his lap and he raced forward into the Welsh territory, everything that could go right for Ireland went right for Ireland. They brought that relentless energy and aggression that they had in November. They dominated Wales every time they had the ball. When they didn't have the ball, it wasn't perfect by any means, but to win 29-7, to score the tries that they did in very difficult conditions, and to get off with a bonus point win start to this tournament. It wasn't, as I say, perfect, but it was a very, very good start for this Irish team, and it kind of reiterated the quality that we saw in November. It wasn't a flash in the pan. This is a team who are really now moving in the right direction under Andy Farrell, and a team that I think when they play the rugby the kind of rugby they played today, with that kind of interlinking forwards and backs, it's so easy to get behind them as a team. They play a lovely brand of rugby. They're very hard to play against, and they're very effective. So an unbelievably good start against a poor Welsh team, it must be said. But Ireland can only manage what's in front of them, and they were really, really good today.
That's right, Cian. Ireland really do have their identity now, and they did take up where they left off in November, and that's something we all really wanted to see.
Yeah, absolutely, Sinead. I think Rudd is right. I think the ferocity with which Ireland played was incredible. I mean, in the 79th minute there, I was still watching Caelan Doris and Josh van der Flier smashing rucks. The Welsh couldn't live with the physicality of the Irish pack at all. And that seems like such a strange thing for us to say about an Ireland team. And you think back to 2019 and how much they were bullied by England and, at the World Cup then as well. So it's been a real transformation. I think the big test will be next weekend. Like, can they play the same way and handle the physicality of the French, what they'll throw at them? But as starts to the Six Nations campaign go, I think Andy Farrell will be really, really happy. I think he'll be a bit frustrated with the last 20 minutes. After Gary Ringrose scored his try, they wrapped up the bonus point, but they certainly left a few scores out them. But like I said, as starting points to go, it's a great place to be going into Paris next weekend.
Yeah, Rory, that's the thing now about not getting too carried away. Because do we have to balance out Ireland's performance with Wales not performing to the standard that we expected them, even though they were without marquee names?
I think for the fans, after everything everyone's been through, to have a full Aviva Stadium, they're entitled to go off and celebrate this and enjoy it for what it is. But I think within the camp, obviously there is a reality to it. It's their job. They're out to win this tournament. They want a Grand Slam. If not a Grand Slam, they win a title. And if they want to get there, they need to improve on this performance, and they need to take into account the fact that Wales are missing an awful lot of experience, and weren't able to live with them physically. Whereas other teams like England and France in particular, or maybe even Scotland, will be able to do that as this tournament goes on. That said, to go 50 minutes almost in international rugby without conceding a penalty, while also being incredibly aggressive and setting a physical tone, that's a really, a real statement of what Ireland are able to do right now under this coach. And while they have to be realistic about it, they will take a lot of belief and a lot of confidence from the way they played today, the way they opened up Wales at times, the way they defended without the ball. So yes, there is a grain of salt that has to be taken with this, that you can't get too carried away with one win at the start of a long tournament. But they're one-fifth of the way there. They played very, very well. And I think they have to be able to, one thing Andy Farrell has always been doing since he's taken over is that you celebrate these successes. You enjoy the moment when you win. They'll focus on it on Monday. And it's the first big test of this kind of success that Ireland have had. They've won a lot of games here in the Aviva Stadium. They haven't done it on the road yet. They've beaten Scotland and Italy, but go to Paris and beat France next week. That's another challenge altogether, especially playing the way they're playing. A team that beat the All Blacks in November as well. That's going to be really, really interesting to see whether they're able to do it. But all the tools are there for them to go and beat anyone at the moment. They're playing such a good brand of rugby, such an effective brand of rugby. They're a nightmare to play against this Irish team.
And one guy who wasn't there in November, obviously, Rory, was Mack Hansen. A lot of talk about him before this game, making his debut, but he really did slip in with such ease to that, starting as soon as the first or second minute.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen it for Connacht all season. He's been really exciting. But I thought what was really interesting was they didn't try and ease him into the game. He found ways into the game himself. Johnny Sexton was looking for him with the ball. We'd heard he was doing great stuff in training. Well, like you can see there that they all already like him. They're already kind of get him involved at every moment. It's a lovely story. You spoke to his parents, Sinead, like a great piece about his rise, where he's come from, and what it means to him and his family back in Australia. But he looks like he's going to be part of this Irish setup for a while now. James Lowe is not going to be available in Paris as far as we're aware. So he will start next week in Paris, and he looks like a real weapon for Ireland now. A guy who, 9 months ago, none of us had, we may have seen him playing Super Rugby, but we didn't really know he was on the radar. And now he's playing a full role in a Six Nations campaign. Really effective, really good start. And just shows this environment is making players comfortable enough to go out and make statement performances on debut.
And Cian, Ireland led 10-0 at half-time, which really didn't reflect Ireland's dominance in that game. Were you worried or concerned? Was it inevitable that Ireland would indeed kick on in the second half?
I don't think I was concerned, Sinead. I think even if you look at the calibre of the bench that Ireland had to roll off, like Wales just simply hadn't got the same strength and depth. You mentioned the calibre of players that they're missing. Look, that was always going to come back to haunt them, I think, later in the game. You're right. Like Johnny Sexton missed 2 shots at goal. It could have been more. They left a couple of tries out there as well. But just to touch on Mack Hansen for a second, he's become such a crowd favourite in such a short space of time in the sports ground because he gets people off their seats. And like Rod mentioned, it was amazing to see a full crowd back here at the Six Nations games. We've been covering the Six Nations games while there's been no one here, and it's been tough, it's been soulless. So it was just an incredible occasion. But I spotted, don't know if it was picked up on TV, but just after Mack Hansen was named as man of the match, he kind of turned around to the crowd. He was standing out in the left wing and he had a little moment to them. And I just kind of thought like he could become a crowd favourite, I think, here as well with Ireland, just as he is for Connacht, because Andy Farrell and Mike Catt, the attack coach, they've created this left wing spot and it's almost a free role. We saw James Lowe last November, how effective he was in coming in, looking for work and not necessarily playing to a defined role. Like I said, Andy Farrell came out with a comment that he doesn't want his wingers to be tidy. And that's why I think Mack Hansen got the nod today, to much the surprise of a lot of people, including myself. But we've seen that role now has become a little bit different than it probably is. It particularly on the opposite wing as well. Andrew Conway, it's probably a little bit different to that as well. So Hansen slotted in there so seamlessly, which I think is a massive credit to him, but I think it's also a massive credit to how far Ireland's attack has come in the last 12 months, because in the first season it was this kind of stuff was nowhere to be seen. So it's been a remarkable turnaround. And Rod says, it's only one win at the start of a Six Nations campaign, but it's worth looking at the bigger picture. This is Ireland's 9th win in a row. That includes a win over New Zealand. So they have serious momentum behind them going into Paris next weekend, which will be a much tougher test than they had today.
Yeah, Cian, obviously his selection of Mack Hansen absolutely vindicated. Were there any other elements of the Ireland play today that impressed you in particular?
I just thought the pack, once again, I mean, we're blue in the face from talking about this front row, but it's impossible not to when you see what they're capable of. They've changed the whole face of this Ireland team, and that feeds into the attack. Like I said, what Ireland are able to do on the ball. I thought Andrew Porter was superb once again. Tadhg Furlong, while he was on the pitch, was absolutely outstanding. He threw one sensational pass in the first half. He's redefining the role, isn't he? What's being asked of a tight end. I thought, it was clever by Andy Farrell. He got 50, maybe I think it was about 50 minutes into his legs. Like, he's obviously missed a few weeks of action, and it was good to see someone like Finlay Bealham coming on, because it is a bit of a question mark. Who is the next man in if Tadhg Furlong isn't there? So I thought that was another positive. Caelan Doris and Josh van der Flier and Jack Conan again in the back row, superb. I mean, it obviously helps that the front row and the back row are playing and training as well week in, week out for Leinster, and you can see it when they come on. They just know each other's games inside out. Jack Conan went off early. It was nice to see Caelan Doris get a run at number 8 as well. Like, that is still his preferred position. It's amazing to think how well he's playing at blindside, and it's not really the position he wants to be playing in. But I thought he was awesome again. Like I said, in the 79th minute, he was still smashing rucks. Every time he got on the ball, Wales just couldn't live with his physicality whatsoever. So the pack put in a huge performance, I think, and then that allowed the backs to play out, the platform to play off.
Yeah, Rory, it was definitely a luxury, the fact that Andy Farrell was able to take off the likes of Tyke Furlong even before the hour mark, which showed their dominance in the game. Going to Paris next week, the hype is just going to go mental. What are the areas do you think that they will need to improve on if they're going to take down, I suppose, the favourites in this game, in this Six Nations?
It's really just getting right all of the things that they've gotten right at home away against the French team who will be able to match them physically. So if they're able to, like, can they dominate a team who have all of the physical attributes that they have? You know, that like this is the first time that Porter, Kelleher, and Furlong have really come up against the front row with the same dynamism as them. So they'll need to use their footwork. They'll need to use those clever tip-on passes. They're away from home, so it's the first time they faced a vociferous French crowd. We saw the scenes in November when they beat New Zealand. There's a real connection now between this French team who are on their own journey and the Paris crowd. So there's just a new set of challenges. Like obviously every game takes on its own life, and you know it's not going to be the same challenge beating France as it is beating Wales. There is a whole new set of things that they need to overcome away from home next week. Their last trip to Paris was a disaster. It was that game when the nation's title was on the line, and Andy Farrell spoke afterwards about how they went into their shells. They need to show that they've made mental leaps since that time, since they went to Twickenham and got beaten twice in 2020 as well, that they're able to go on the road and they're able to dominate an opponent physically. That if they don't dominate physically, they have lots of challenges to overcome next weekend. And that's why I don't think it's time to get truly excited to get a title. I think it'll only come if they're able to get a result in Paris, because that is the next step for this team, to go away from Dublin and to win in a Paris or a Twickenham. Do that, and it's like you can really believe that this team is on a really, really exciting upward curve. A lot of the evidence is there now, but this is the next box that they have to tick.
Cian, just looking ahead to next week, staying with next week, do you think Andy Farrell will stick with the same team? Obviously, we're just soon after the full-time whistle here and depends on fitness and all the rest, but do you think he will stick with that same team? Or did anybody on the bench particularly impress?
I think he'd be very slow to change a winning team. I mean, you look like someone like Mac Hansen, it was a wild card selection. There's no doubt about it. And, if it didn't go well for him today, you might not have seen him in an Ireland shirt for a long, long time. But look how well he played. I think it would be incredibly harsh to drop him. Obviously, we're still waiting to hear news of Keith Earl's hamstring scan. But, I mean, you wouldn't imagine he's going to turn it around and be fit for next weekend. Anyway, Robbie Henshaw will be back in the mix. Ian Henderson. I think Ian Henderson is probably the one you'd imagine will be seriously pushing. I know he didn't play today, but they like his power in the scrum. And probably not one of Tadhg Beirne's strengths, even though like Tadhg Beirne I thought was immense today, and there's been nothing wrong with his scrummaging any time he's played for Ireland, so it would be really harsh to drop him. But I think Henderson and Henshaw coming back into the mix, which it's mad to think like Ireland had two Lions there that didn't get into the team today. They were here with the squad today as extra men. I think if the game had been, bigger, if their title had been on the line, I think Andy Farrell certainly would have pressed him into action if he wanted. But it's a show of the sign of strength and depth that, Bundee Aki was very good again today, linking up with Gary Ringrose, who had, I thought, another one of his better performances in a green jersey. His form lately has been excellent. So I think it would be very harsh to drop anyone, but I think people like Henshaw and Henderson coming back into the mix are going at a serious edge to training next week, which, look, it's exactly where you want to be, isn't it? And I think the most encouraging thing I think is that there's no real sense of this Ireland team going to Paris next weekend and sort of reverting to type. I think that was the one fear I certainly had at times last year when they were proceeding with this more expansive style of play, this higher tempo. But they're sticking with it, and I don't see any reason why they would even think about kind of shoring it up a little bit going to Paris next weekend. I thought a couple of their offloads today a little bit loose. You might not get away. You saw the one try that Wales came from a sloppy offload from Tadhg Beirne, who was put in a tricky position, it must be said, by Conor Murray's pass. So there are a couple of the areas they'll probably have to tighten up on, because if they throw loose offloads to that French backline, they will seriously hurt them, because Wales just didn't have the firepower to do it today.
Yeah, and just finally, Rory, just to wrap, notice has been served by this Irish team. They are indeed contenders. And as Cian just said there, we kind of don't know what their ceiling is.
Absolutely, because apart from Johnny Sexton, it's a very young team. It's a team that are still on a bit of a journey, to use a bit of a cliche, but there's players there who are coming into their peak as international rugby players. There are players who are starting out as international rugby players, and they're only beginning to kind of come together and find their potential. And when you have that front row fit and available, anything is possible because you're able to give the back line a foundation. You're able to win those collisions. You're able to pound, even when you're not scoring in the first half. They were pounding the Welsh into a submission that when the tackles had to be made in the second half, they didn't have anything in their legs. So there is real potential within this team, certainly within this window, to go on and achieve something special. As Cian said, they can't go into their shells now. They must stick to what they're doing because what they're doing is playing to their strengths. This is a team that in 3 years has revolutionized itself into a hard-carrying, dynamic, aggressive, collision-winning team after a couple of years of really being on the wrong end of kind of those big hits, and they're now dominating really good teams at the international level. They're going up against a really good one next week. That's a massive test of where they are, but there's no reason there's no reason to doubt that they'll go over there and give a good account of themselves, and that if they get it right, that they can beat anyone on their day. So yeah, it's like the sky is the limit for this team right now.
Oh, exciting times. Rory Keane, thanks for joining us. Well, that's it from us. Follow all the action through the week on independent.ie. Bye for now.